A'udhu billah minash shaitanir rajim. We seek refuge in God from Satan the rejected. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. Salãmun Alaykum. Peace be upon you. God willing, today we want to have another session for the studying of the appendices of Quran, the Final Testament, translated by Dr. Rashad Khalifa, the Messenger of the Covenant. And God willing, today we want to start from this section with subtitle A Strong Foundation. So it says, the Quran's first verse, in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, known as Bismillah, consists of 19 Arabic letters. Its constituent words occur in the Quran consistently in multiples of 19. So let's first of all take a look at the word Bismillah, basically the expression Bismillah in the Quran. So if you look at, for example, Surah number 1, Surah Al-Fatiha, the key, you would see that it starts with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and it has actually exactly 19 letters. So let's count together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. So the expression in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, consists of 19 Arabic letters, basically. Okay, and then the words which make or basically are constituents of the expression Bismillah are basically four words, and each and every one of them occurs in the Quran in multiples of 19. The first word is Ism or name. It occurs 19 times. The second word, Allah, God, occurs 2,698 times. That we have already talked about it and how you can find it and see how many times it has occurred in the Quran. Then the third word is Ar-Rahman, which is most gracious. It occurs 57 times, which is 19 times 3. And then the fourth word is Ar-Rahim, most merciful, and it occurs in the Quran 114 times, 19 times 6. It's really interesting to pay attention to it that the word S basically has like occurs 19 times, and that's equal to the letters of the expression Bismillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. And then the word ar-Rahim occurs 114 times, and that is equal to the number of the chapters of Quran. That's absolutely fantastic, subhanallah. Now, here we have Professor Cesar Majul looked at the geometrical value of more than 400 attributes of God and found only four names whose geometrical values are multiples of 19. And so we have the divine name, we have Wahid, which means one, and the geometrical value of Wahid is 19. Then we have the word Zulfazl al Azim, which is the possessor of infinite grace, and that's the geometrical value of this expression is 2,698. And then we have Majid, which is glorious, and that the geometrical value of Majid is 57. And then Jami, which means summoner, and the geometrical value of Jami is 114. Now, first of all, let's take a look at who Professor Cesar Majul was. So, Professor Cesar Adib Majul was a historian from Philippines, and he's best known for his work on the history of Islam in the Philippines. And basically, he was actually one of the people who had this research on the geometrical value of attributes of God, and found that only these four, basically, their geometrical values are multiple of 19, and that's absolutely fantastic. And this is exactly what we see here as well. So if you look at it, for example, in the expression Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, Ism happens 19 times, and that is equal to the geometrical value of the word Wahid, which means one. And that is basically the theme of Quran, that there is only one God. And this is absolutely fantastic that only Wahid has the geometrical value of 19. And then we have the second word, which is Allah in the expression Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And Allah occurs in the Quran 2,698 times. And that is actually equal to the geometrical value of the expression Zul Fazl al-Azim, which means the possessor of infinite grace. Basically, it means that God, Allah Almighty, is the possessor of infinite grace. And then we have the third word, Ar-Rahman. Ar-Rahman, which means most gracious, that occurs in the Quran 57 times. And that is equal to the geometrical value of the word Majid, which means glorious. And then we have the word Ar-Rahim, which is basically, it occurs in the Quran 114 times, which is 19 times 6. And it is equal to the geometrical value of the word Jame, which is summoner. So that's absolutely fantastic. This mathematical relationship between the geometrical value of these four expressions and the number of times they have occurred in the Quran, these four words, Ism, Allah, Ar-Rahman, and Ar-Rahim, that have occurred in the Quran, that's absolutely fantastic. So here we have, as noted above, the only divine names whose geometrical values are divisible by 19 correspond exactly to the frequencies of occurrence of the Bismillah's four words. The figure below illustrates this remarkable phenomenon, and that's exactly what I explained to you. So we have the number, we have 19. So we have Ism, which means name. It occurs in the Quran 19 times, and then 19 is also the geometrical value of the word Wahid, which means one, basically in Arabic. And then 2,698, and that is the number of times the word Allah occurs in the Quran, and that is the word God in Arabic, basically. And then we have the geometrical value of the expression Zul Fazl al-Azim, which means possessor of infinite grace, and basically the geometrical value of Zul Fazl al-Azim is 2,698. And then we have the word Rahman, which means most gracious, and it occurs in the Quran 57 times. And we have the word Majid, which, like the geometrical value of the word Majid, which means glorious, is 57. And then we have the word Rahim, which means most merciful, and that occurs in the Quran 114 times. And then we have the word Jame, which means gatherer, and the geometrical value of the word Jame is 114. So here we have the four words of Bismillah are shown on the left side, and the only four divine names whose geometrical values are divisible by 19 are on the right side. The numbers in the middle are the frequencies of occurrence of the words of Bismillah, and at the same time the geometrical values of the four divine names. Subhanallah. And then how can we check the geometrical value of these four words? If you want to do that, it's very easy. There's a website called Abjad Calc, which is the Abjad calculator. And you can simply type, if you're familiar with the Arabic script, you can type the word in this calculator. Or even if you are not familiar with it, you could just like find it somewhere and then copy and paste it into the Abjad calculator. And then it gives you the total Abjad value. And it says that the total Abjad value of the word Wahid is 19. Basically, that's what we have here. So Wahid, Wav, Alif, He, and Dal. And that is Wahid. And the basically the abjad value of the word Wahid, or the geometrical value of the word Wahid, is 19. And then we have Dhul Fazl al-Azim, and that is 2,698. And what we have here, 2,698. And then we have the word Majid, and the geometrical value of that, or the abjad value of the word Majid, is 57. And we have the geometrical value 57. And then we have the word Jame, and the total abjad value of Jame is 114. And again, the total value of the word Jame here is also 114. And this is absolutely fantastic phenomenon that is occurring in the Quran. Subhanallah. Now, let's go to this section. We have the 5 pillars of Islam. Although the Quran provides numerous important commandments governing all aspects of our lives, see, for example, 17:22 to 38, that you can read for yourself. These are actually several commandments which are mentioned in the Quran. Five basic pillars have been traditionally emphasized. They are, so basically, there are many commandments, numerous commandments in the Quran, but then there are five basic pillars which are the basic pillars of submission to God alone. And they are mentioned here. So number one is shahada. Shahada means bearing witness that there is no other God besides God. This is very important, and we have it in the expression la ilaha illallah, meaning that there is no God except the one God. And this is very, very important. This is the number one pillar of submission to God alone, the true Islam. And unfortunately, the idol worshippers, be it Sunni or Shia, they have created a false shahada, and they have added the name of Prophet Muhammad next to the name of God, and they are basically breaking a good number of commandments which are mentioned in the Quran. Number one is that we should not put any difference between any messengers of God, and by doing this, we are putting a difference between Prophet Muhammad and the rest of the messengers, basically messengers of God. The second one is that we are associating somebody with God, and then associating anybody or anything with God is tantamount to idol worship, and by that you are basically breaking this commandment that there is no other God besides God. By putting the name of anyone or anything next to God, you're putting a partner besides God, and basically the whole point of shahada is to bear witness that there is no God except the one God. Now, number two, the second pillar of submission to God alone is salat, or the contact prayers, observing 5 daily contact prayers. Number three is Siyam, fasting during the 9th month of the Islamic calendar, Ramadan. Number four is Zakat, giving away 2.5% of one's net income as a charity to specified people, which are mentioned in the Quran, specifically in chapter 2, verse 215. And then we have the Hajj pilgrimage, and that is the pilgrimage to Mecca once in a lifetime for those who can afford it. Like everything else in the Quran, these are mathematically structured. Subhanallah. And then definitely we will get to them one by one. So let's get started from the first pillar of submission to God alone, and that is one God, and that is Shahada. As mentioned earlier, the word one that refers to God occurs in the Quran 19 times. The reference to God alone occurs 5 times, and the sum of the surah and verse numbers where we find these 5 occurrences is 361, or 19 times 19. This is really, really interesting. So, how can we check this? The Arabic word alone refers to God in 770, 39, 40, 45, 4012, and 4084, obviously, and 64. If you add these numbers, you get 361, and that is 19 times 19. And subhanallah, this is one place that it is talking about it. And the second place is this verse, verse 4 of Surah 60, and it says the Arabic word for alone, wahdahu, occurs only 6 times in the Quran. One of them refers to upholding the Quran alone, which is in 1746 that I just mentioned it to you. And the reference to God alone occurs in these verses one more time: 770, 3945, 4012, and 4084, and 64. The sum of these numbers would be 7 plus 70 plus 39 plus 45 plus 40 plus 12. And obviously, because these two verses, 12 and 84, are in the same surah, basically 40, chapter 40, we're going to count chapter 40 one time. So it would be chapter 40, verse 12, and then verse 84, and then chapter 60, and verse 4. And then this equals 361, and that is 19 times 19. So this emphasizes that the main theme of the Quran is worship God alone. Subhanallah. Now, the first pillar of Islam is stated in 318 as La ilaha illahu. there is no other God besides him. So let's take a look at 318. Okay, so here it says in Arabic, Shahid Allahu annahu la ilaha illahu. So what does it say? It says, God bears witness that there is no God except He. Shahid Allahu annahu la ilaha illahu. La ilaha illahu means there is no God except He. So what does that tell us? So this most important expression occurs in 19 surahs. This La ilaha illahu occurs in 19 surahs. The first occurrence is in 163, and this is 163. وَإِلَهُكُمْ إِلَهٌ وَاحِدٌ La ilaha illahu. This is the first part, the first verse in the Quran that we have this expression La ilaha illahu. There is no God but He, or there is no God except He, basically. And the last occurrence of this expression La ilaha illahu is in 73:9. 73:9 here. Rabbul Mashriq wal Maghrib La ilaha illahu. Lord of the East and the West, there is no other God besides Him. This is the last verse in the Quran, 73:9, that we have this expression, basically La ilaha illahu, in the Quran. Table 22 shows that the total of surah numbers plus the number of verses between the first and the last occurrences plus the sum of these verse numbers is 316,502, or 19 times 16,658. So what does this mean? So we have to take a look at this basically table to be able, we have to basically take a look at this table to be able to understand what it says. Obviously, this is a shortened, truncated table, and I have created the bigger, expanded, basically, version of this table myself. I wanted to see these mathematical calculations for myself. Now, let's take a look at that, and I will explain it to you in details, God willing. Now, this is that same table, table 22, and it says all surahs and verses from the first occurrence of La ilaha illahu to the last occurrence. So we have four basically columns in this table. So we have surah number, and then we have number of verses, and then we have sum of verse numbers, and then we have total. Now it's very important to pay attention, as we saw in the PDF, that the first part that the La ilaha illahu is occurring is 163. The point is that Surah 2 has 286 verses. 286 verses. So basically, from the verse 163 here, 163, where for the first time the expression La ilaha illahu is occurring in the Quran, till the end of Surah 2, chapter 2, the Heifer, there exists 123 verses. So basically, we're not counting the whole verses of Surah 2, because for the first time that the expression La ilaha illahu is occurring, it is occurring at verse 163, right? 163. And from 163 till the end of chapter 2, there are exactly 123 verses, right? And this is very important to take note of. So the sum of the verse numbers, basically starting from the verse 163 till the end of chapter 2, which is the longest chapter in the Quran, and it has 286 verses. We have to count those verses and add them together. We shouldn't start from the beginning. We should start from that verse 163 and start counting verses one by one and go till the end of basically chapter 2 to get the sum of verses for this chapter. So this is a little bit of a detailed calculation that I have done it for myself over here to be able to have a better understanding of what is happening. So it is not part of the table. I've just left it here so that you can see the calculations for yourself. So the first verse where La ilaha illahu is occurring in the second chapter or the second surah is verse 163, right? 163. So this is the first time that La ilaha illahu is occurring. Now, the sum of verses from the beginning of Surah until this point is 13,366, right? 13,366. And I have done it by a formula, and the formula is that you multiply this number by itself plus 1 divided by 2, and then you can get the sum of numbers from a certain number, starting from a certain number till that number. So from 1 to 163, the sum of verses would be 13,366. And then the total number of the verses in second chapter or the second surah is 286, right? So the sum of verses from 1 to 286 would be, and the situation is that we multiply this number, 286, multiplied by itself plus 1 divided by 2, and this is the function that we get. And then if we get the difference between these two numbers, right, we get 27,675. This is the difference between these two numbers. So this is the sum of the verse numbers from the beginning until the end of chapter 2, and this is the sum of verse numbers from the beginning until verse 163, where for the first time the expression La ilaha illahu is occurring, right? So the difference between these two is going to be 27,675, and that's exactly what we need here. And that's exactly what we are going to be putting here, 27,675. Now, for the rest of them, it's easy because all of those chapters are going to be included in our calculations, and there we don't need to make like any crazy calculations. This one was like the hardest and the most difficult one. But anyhow, so the first part that it is occurring in the Quran, it's 2163, the verse 2163, and the last part that it is, the last verse that it is occurring in the Quran is 73:9. So if we go all the way to the end of the basically table, we will see that this is chapter 73, and verse 9 is the last verse in the Quran that basically the expression La ilaha illahu is occurring. Obviously, this is not the last verse in this surah either. So we are going to count only from the beginning of the surah until this point. So it will be 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7 plus 8 and then plus 9. And this would be basically the addition of these numbers up to this point. Now, we have done the same exact thing for the rest of the surahs and chapters as well. So surah 3, it has 200 verses, and then we have the sum of verse numbers. Surah 4, it has 176 verses, and this is the sum of verses, and all of these are done in a formulaic way, and then so that there's no mathematical mistake occurring here. And then all the way to surah number 9, then we know that surah number 9 is 127 verses and not 129, as the fabricators have added 2 verses, false verses to Quran. And in the real Quran that we have at hand, we have gotten rid of 128 and 129. So Surah 9 basically has 127 verses. And the sum of verse numbers is also counted from number 1 up to 127, and this is the sum of verse numbers. And then the rest of the surahs as well, we have it all the way up to 73:9 that we just discussed. And be ready for the miracle, subhanallah. If we add surah number plus number of verses plus sum of verse numbers, we get a total. For all three columns altogether, we get a total. And if we do this all the way to the end of the basically chapter 73, verse 9, where the last part of the Quran, where the expression La ilaha illahu is occurring, we get 127. And then when we add up all these numbers together, the fourth column together, we get a grand total of 316,502 and that is a multiple of 19, and that is 19 times 16,658. Subhanallah. And that's exactly the number that we have here. If you take a look at this one, we have 316,502, 316,502, and it is a multiple of 19. 19 times 16,658. 19 times 16,658. Subhanallah. Subhanallah. The only thing that we can say is Subhanallah. Praise be to God. God be glorified for this mathematical miracle that He has placed in the Quran. And this is the proof of authentication, for this uh, great, grand book, magnificent book that we have at hand. Subhanallah. This is one of the basically thousands of mathematical calculations that we have in the Quran that we end up with a multiple of 19. We have had so many so far, and we still have a lot of them to go. But this is just absolutely mind-numbing and absolutely fantastic. So we have surah number of verses in those surahs, and some of verse numbers, and then it occurred to be like it happened to be a multiple of 19. Subhanallah. So I think this is enough for this session. God willing, in the next session, we are going to talk about table 23. There's some more calculations regarding the expression La ilaha illahu. And for this session, I think this is enough. And until the next session and the next file, may God be with you. Peace be upon you. Salāmun Alaykum.